All right, we got a civil war within the GOP. We got senators now fighting back on the Republican side against the conservative groups, and we're going to break it down for you. Now, what you see in the rest of the media is, oh, well, look at the Republican Party. They're so hurt, they're divided, and it's cost them. Well, what it's cost them is not entirely clear as far as policy is concerned. They still seem to be getting a lot of what they want. So let me break it down for you. First of all, yes, they're right. Establishment Republican senators are definitely pissed, and you can tell in a quote like this. Senator Bob Corker from Tennessee says, "I think there's a growing recognition around here that many of the outside groups do what they do solely to raise money, and there are some participants inside Congress who do the same." Damn. Okay, that's obviously a swipe at Senator Ted Cruz, at least saying, some in Congress who are just trying to do these things to raise money for themselves, which Ted Cruz did raise a tremendous amount of money for his own campaign when he did that fake filibuster during the government shutdown, or that led to the government shutdown. And of course, for the outside groups, he's referring to Senate Conservatives Fund, Heritage Action, Madison Project and Club for Growth, among others. But those are four big conservative outside groups. I'm going to get back to them in a second. Now, Bob Corker says he's had enough of it. He says, "I think people are getting tired of that. I'm tired of it before I got here." So he's pretty mad about it. Now, let's show you why they do it, right? Why do the outside groups do it? I mean, the government shutdown appeared to be a marketing disaster for the Republicans, and you would think that eventually that would hurt them in congressional races. So was it worth the price, and why did they do it? Well, you see, the Senate Conservatives Fund, which pushes the Republican Party further to the right, their primary motivation isn't necessarily how many Republican senators there are. They care about policy. We'll get to that in a second. They also, of course, care about themselves. So if you look at the first half of the year in 2013, they raised actually less than $1 million. Then they pushed the Republicans in Congress to do a government shutdown. And after the government shutdown, they raised over $4.7 million. You see what kind of a difference that made? So that made at least about an extra $4 million for that group. So yes, it might have hurt the Republican Party overall. It didn't hurt the Senate Conservatives Fund. It helped them tremendously because they got to say, we're the tip of the spear. We're pushing them towards the right. And so they collected a lot of money for doing that. So Bob Corker is right to say that that is one of their motivations. But there's another one. And it's actually a reasonable one for the conservatives, and one that actually generally works. So let me explain. Now, in this upcoming election cycle, there's actually 12 Senate Republicans that are up for re-election. Do you know how many of them have primary fights? 7. So 7 of the 12 seats up are going to get primary fights so that they can push those Republican senators to the right. Either the right-wing candidate, the extreme right-wing candidate, wins in the primary, or they get the already really conservative candidate to go even further right because of the primary. Now, out of the 16 Senate Democrats that are up for re-election in the next cycle, how many of them have primary fights? 0. Isn't that amazing? None of them. That's why they never get pushed to the left. That's why they continue to go further and further right to meet the extreme right that's pushed the Republican Party further right. So that's why our politics never goes left, is nowhere near the middle. It just keeps drifting over towards the right. And in fact, they realize that. The guy running the Madison Project is Daniel Horowitz, and he says, look, we might not even win on any of those primary fights. He says, I don't care if we don't win on them. He says this, quote, boy, oh boy, they shift over to the right, referring to Republican candidates like Orrin Hatch and Pat Roberts and all the guys who face primaries, and then all of a sudden say, what are you talking about, man? No, I'm going to have the most extreme right-wing positions of anybody in the Senate. And then Democrats then, when they're negotiating with those people, go, well, okay, I can't give you everything you want, but I'll give you 60% of what you want. And then all of a sudden, whoa, what happened to our Overton window? Got shifted all the way to the extreme, right? So they know what they're doing, and it's actually not a bad strategy. That's what you never see in the rest of the media. They say, oh, the GOP lost on this. Really? On policy grounds, I mean, look at the last budget deal. The Democrats literally got nothing that they wanted. The Republicans, they didn't get everything they wanted. And so everybody's like, ha ha, I see that for a change. The Republicans didn't get 98% of what they wanted, which is what famously John Boehner said about previous negotiations with President Obama. In this case, they only got 40% of what they wanted. What did the Democrats get in return? Nothing. Nobody got their taxes raised. There was no other way of collecting revenue. The defense contractors got more money. The people who had to pay up were federal workers, military workers. They cut Medicare again in terms of future participation in sequester cuts. So the Republicans keep on winning on policy terms. And in fact, even the Senate Republicans who are fighting back against those conservative groups, fighting, right? Look at Mike Johans from Nebraska and what he says. He says, look, I don't know many Republicans anymore that are described as anything near moderate. We're a pretty conservative bunch. We just don't get here without being pretty conservative. So, in other words, mission accomplished. They've pulled the entire political spectrum to the right by doing these kind of government shutdowns, extreme tactics that the Democrats don't push back to the left on nearly enough. And so we're not at the center of where the country is in terms of where D.C. is. They're further to the right than anywhere near the center of this country. So don't believe the hype when you see people giggling, especially on MSNBC, like, oh, the GOP is a civil war, they're split. and then to what purpose? And how did we take advantage of that to get progressive priorities? We didn't. We don't get progressive priorities.